Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, the place where I help new and aspiring law students learn the strategies to get the grades and get hired so that you can start your lawyering life on your own terms. In today's video, we're going to be covering some of the most common questions I've gotten from law students over the years. So this is our first official law school Q&A video. I'm so excited. And if you are thinking about law school or wondering how to jumpstart a kick-ass law school career, be sure to also join us over in the free Law School Network Facebook group, where you can connect with over 1,000 law students and pre-law students all going through the same journey you are and sharing their experiences and cheering each other on. It's an amazing community, so I hope to see you over there soon. And if you guys are excited to dive in, go ahead and smash that like button and let's go. So probably the most common question I get from new law students is, how many hours per day will I study in law school? And so we're speaking in generalities here, of course, but on average, you can expect to take about 15 credit hours your first semester. And so that translates into an average of 2.5 to 3.5 class hours per day during the week. And then I advise my students to carve out about 6 to 8 additional hours to study each day. And so on average, in general, you're looking at about a 10 to 12 hour day, which is really long. Most of us are not accustomed to working that many hours and staying focused for that many hours in a day. And so there's a couple of things to keep in mind when we talk about law school studying and the amount of time that goes into it. The first one is that you will build up endurance over time. And so just as if you were training for a marathon, as you are studying in law school, you are going to get more exhausted earlier on when you're first starting out. And then as you study and as you read and as you get accustomed to the material, you'll be able to go longer and longer during those days, and they won't wear you out as much. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you are first starting out, all of this information is new. The language is new, the density is new, the complexity is new. Everything is a brand new learning curve. And so you'll also be going more slowly. So as you study, it will take you longer to get through these different study tasks. And as you go, as those weeks and months continue into your first semester of law school, you'll go faster and faster. So keep that in mind as well. The last thing I would say in terms of time allocation when you're studying is that it is far less important how much time you are spending studying and far more important what you are using that time to do. And so if you're interested in what the breakdown of those study strategies are when we're talking about using our time the most efficiently that we possibly can, then definitely check out my free Beat the Curve Quick Start Guide. I'll make sure to link it below this video so that you can see what those study steps are and how each of them builds on the other one to put you exactly where you need to be by the time final exams roll around. Question number 2, do you recommend handwritten notes or typed notes? I am going to come clean and say that I have very strong personal opinions and a personal bias when it comes to this question. And it's not a very popular opinion, and that is that I love typed notes. I'm a huge typed notes fan over handwritten notes, and here's why. When we're talking about law school and typing your notes and thinking through just this massive amount of material that you have to get through and that you're going to be taught, typed notes allow you to get information on the page faster. It allows you to get more information on the page, especially when we're talking about a lecture style class where you have to record in writing what the professor is saying. It allows you to emphasize and synthesize and organize the information as you go. And it also allows you to have that bonus of being able to practice your typing, which comes in really handy when we start talking about preparing for final exams. It's also a lot easier to transition those notes into an outline, which is going to be the following study step. And so when you're kind of thinking through how you would like to approach notes, here are a couple of things to keep in mind. The first one is that most students who come to me that I coach are more comfortable starting out with handwritten notes because that's what they've always done. And so the thing that I would kind of caution you about is recognizing that comfort zone and that reluctance to get outside of the comfort zone. So if taking handwritten notes is something that you've always done, I would at least invite you to try typed notes, because of course, anytime you try something new, it's going to be a little bit slower, a little bit scarier. a little bit more of a learning curve, but once you get through that learning curve, it is going to speed up things enormously for you on the back end. And so I would at least recommend trying it in a class to see if you like it. The other thing I would say is that there are students who are handwriting note aficionados who are not interested in transitioning to typed notes, or you may be in a class where a professor does not allow you to have electronics in the room, in which case, of course, you would be defaulting to handwritten notes, and that's totally fine. I know some law students have a really hard time focusing if they're typing instead of handwriting, and some law students have a sense of stress if they're trying to get down too much information in a lecture. And so if that is you, that is totally fine. Handwritten notes are definitely workable. One common approach that is sort of a hybrid of the two is to take digitized hand notes, so writing on a tablet that can be more easily transitioned into an outline later on. So you can also try that as well. And yes, I am aware of the studies out there that say that you retain more information in the moment when you're handwriting because you're allowing your brain to synthesize the information and internalize it. But the big difference between a lot of those studies and law school is that you're not tested on the material immediately after class or even at the end of the week. You're tested on that material 4 months later. And so the ability to get that information on the page so that we can use it and work with it is really, really important. And if I were personally enrolling in law school today for the first time and I had finals in 4 months, I would personally type every single one of my notes, no questions asked. Next question. Cold calls seem terrifying. What is the deal with cold calls? All right, so cold calls are an interesting phenomenon in law school, and it refers to the way in which the professor asks questions of students in class. And so when we talk about cold calls, they're named that because usually professors are calling on a student at random, right? So they have the seating chart and they just start the class by saying, Miss Watson, tell us about Plessy versus Ferguson. And so, as you can imagine, they instill a lot of fear into new law students because you are just sitting there taking notes in class and you have no idea at what point you're going to be called up to the hot seat and start to be peppered with questions about a case that you read. And there's a lot of a feeling of wanting to perform well in front of your classmates and in front of your professor. So here's some really good news. Cold calls do not matter. They do not matter. You do not have to do them well. And there is no correlation between how well you perform in class and how well you're going to do on a final exam. And this is really important, really powerful information to have, because what tends to happen is that professors emphasize the importance of reading and preparing for class almost to the exclusion of everything else. And what is really important to understand is that, yes, of course, we're going to be reading the readings, and yes, of course, we're going to be paying attention in class, but your performance in front of your classmates and in front of your professor doesn't affect your grade. For most law schools, class participation is either 0% of your grade or something very nominal and small, like 3% or 5% or a bump up or a bump down, which is never going to affect you as long as you are just baseline prepared, meaning the way I like to think of it is a C+ understanding of the case heading into class. And that is very, very, very important to keep in mind, because one of the biggest mistakes that law students make is over preparing for class and over allocating time on the reading because they get so terrified of those cold call scenarios. And so when you are thinking through cold calls, just keep in mind that you don't need to know all of the answers. It is perfectly fine to just get by and kind of fumble through and sort of guess and do your best. And if you are embarrassed or you feel like it didn't go well or you feel a little bit humiliated, that's okay. That has happened to all of us. I have literally never nailed a cold call in law school, ever. And that feeling is going to subside very quickly. All anyone else is thinking about is how they're glad that they're not the ones being called on. And like I said, it's not going to affect your grade. So as best as you possibly can, try to see cold calls and the Socratic method of interacting with your professor in class is something that is fun and interesting, and just one of these quirks that make law school the infamous institution that it is, and much less a pressurized performance that has any impact on your grade whatsoever. Next question. Should I join a study group? No, you should not. Let me explain. So study groups are generally one of those things that law students have seen in movies like Legally Blonde, for example, or The Paper Chase. And so you assume that it's a really integral part of the study process for law school. But almost universally, study groups are a very inefficient way to internalize and understand the material. So there are a few reasons for this. The first one is that it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to prevent a study group session from becoming just a full-blown chat session, right? Because you have so much in common with the people that you are going through this same journey with, and there are so many other things to talk about. And so it's somewhat unrealistic to expect that a study group session is going to have 100% focus, time, and energy on the thing that you're actually trying to study. The second thing is that it's also unrealistic to expect that everyone in the study group is going to be learning and understanding the same concepts at the same pace. And so what tends to happen is that you might spend a huge chunk of a study group session reviewing something that you already understand and no time at all on the questions that you actually have. And so it tends to become a really inefficient way to focus on the information that you personally really need to learn. Another reason I'm not a huge fan of study groups is that when you do have a question about something, you're asking other people who are learning this concept for the very first time as well. And so you have a bit of a blind leading the blind situation, as opposed to if you went straight to a professor in their office hours and just asked them the question, you could get an answer in 10 minutes flat. And so it just tends to be, again, an inefficient way to learn the material and really progress through the material. The last thing I would caution you about study groups, if you decide to join one despite all of the shade that I have just thrown all over them, is that you don't fall into this false sense of security. So what tends to happen in a study group, or what can happen, is that as a group, you feel confident about all of the different areas of the law that you're learning because you're leaning on each other and you're getting support from one another. And what's important to remember is that when you walk into final exams at the end of the semester, you are an island. So you personally need to understand all of the concepts, all of the material, and how to apply it on a final exam yourself without the help of anyone else. And so if you do get into a study group, I would not recommend doing communal projects like sharing outlines or dividing up outlines where everybody writes a piece or everybody is assigned a particular outline. You really need to be doing all of the work yourself, because when the final exams come around, you are going to be the only one in that room taking that final exam for you. Before we move on to the next question, the one thing I will concede about study groups, and the one way I have seen it work well for some students, is when the study group is very, very specific about its purpose and very, very compartmentalized in terms of when they meet. And specifically, a study group that is designed to only review practice exams that all of the study group members have already taken on their own time, and then they come together to review the answers to help each other issue spot and help each other develop arguments. And even in that scenario, it's at the very end of the semester on a very strict schedule for a very specific purpose of reviewing those answers. And so if you are interested in implementing that into your study strategy, that's the best way that I have seen study groups actually work. Next question, should I use supplements? So I will say that I am a huge fan of supplements. And just so that we're all on the same page, supplements is a generic term for any resource that helps you understand the material of the class outside of the textbook that you've been assigned and the words coming out of your professor's mouth, right? So anything extra that helps you understand and process the information. And so what I would say, kind of in the spirit of the most famous of law school answers, which is it depends, you do want to adopt supplements on a class-by-class basis. So if your professor is someone who teaches the material very methodically, very thoroughly, in a very well-organized way, then you may not need to use the supplement at all, because your professor is telling you exactly what he or she wants you to know for the final exam. If you are in a situation where the professor is jumping around a lot, is not very clear, is not very organized, or they're spending a lot of their class lecture time just asking hypotheticals without actually teaching you the black letter law, then hell yes, supplements can be a game changer. And some professors actually take the position that it's not their job to teach you the black letter law, in which case, again, a supplement can be the tool that you use to actually walk through that information and make sure that's clear in your mind, and also get you what you need for the final exam. Because even in those situations where the professor is not teaching you the law, your final exam is still going to cover that material. And so it's really important for you to have a way to be able to teach it to yourself and be able to organize it in a way that you can actually use it on a final exam. Next question, hard copy textbooks versus e-textbooks. So this was a non-issue for me when I went to law school because e-textbooks were not a thing, so it was hard copy all the way. And even now, most law students are more comfortable with hard copy textbooks than e-textbooks because that's what they've always used. And so very similarly to our conversation about typed versus handwritten notes, I'm a really big fan of keeping everything in one place and keeping everything digitized. It makes the information so much easier to work with and organize and synthesize down the road. And so if you are someone who has always been a hard copy textbook person, I invite you to at least try one e-textbook with one class. That way you can see how much more quickly you're able to take notes, organize your notes, and get through the cases than you would if you were writing everything and highlighting everything in a hard copy textbook. And that way you can compare and contrast if it is worth the time investment and also worth the money investment, because e-textbooks tend to be more expensive than hard copy books, which you can rent and buy used, which I 100% recommend if you're gonna go the hard copy route. So those are my feelings on e-textbooks. I invite you guys to at least try one and see how you like it and see if it creates more fluency and more efficiency in your study process. And the last question of this Q&A, is law school as hard as everyone says that it is? So I would say yes and no. Without a doubt, 1L year is tough. And it's tough because everything you are doing is brand new. So for most of us, we have never experienced something as demanding and as overwhelming as 1L year. And so the amount of work that you're assigned, the amount of time it takes to get through the content and understand it, the complexity of the material, how classes are structured, how final exams are structured, how the study strategy changes, all of these different things are coming at you all at once like a tidal wave. And so, yes, it is very common to feel completely underwater, completely lost and confused. And so that first year is really, really tough. There's also a lot of pressure associated with 1L year and 1L year grades in particular. And so on top of being stressed and overwhelmed and confused, you also have this outside pressure on you as well. And so if you ask any lawyer or law student, they will likely tell you that 1L year was one of the most difficult times of their life. That being said, when you do something that is incredibly difficult, you really raise the bar on how you see yourself and what you believe you're capable of. And so I have many times in my life gone through a difficult moment and thought to myself, well, this isn't as hard as 1L finals, and I got through that, so I can get through this. And so that's something that's really beautiful and powerful about doing something that's difficult and showing yourself and providing evidence to yourself that you're much more capable than you think you are. So yeah, 1L year is tough. It's a tough road, but also you can do it. And also it will make you so much more of a confident, powerful individual because of it. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful. I hope that gave you some insight into law school and what to expect. If you have any other questions about law school, be sure to drop them in the comment section below. And if you guys want, if it makes sense, we can make another Q&A video on law school topics. So let me know in the comments below if that is something you guys would want to see. And if you are interested in the ins and outs of law school and how to blow your law school career out of the water, be sure to hit subscribe over here and check out these two amazing videos over here, because every other week I am here to give you guys tips and strategies and approaches to really making your lawyering career and your lawyering life everything you want it to be. So if you haven't yet, be sure to join us inside the Free Law School Network Facebook group. I can't wait to see you guys inside, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.